Warning: the following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Accordingly, viewer discretion is advised. In December 2025, just a few months ago, a 89-year-old man died in a nursing home in Norway. His name was Arnfinn Nesset. He had spent the final years of his life in a nursing home, the same type of institution where he had worked as a manager decades earlier. The same type of place where he had poisoned at least 22 elderly patients in their beds. Nesset was Norway's most prolific convicted serial killer. A man who used his position of absolute trust, a caregiver, a manager, a nurse, to end the lives of the most vulnerable people in his care. He served 12 years. Then walked free. And lived another 3 decades under an assumed name. And now, a 2025 book has raised the possibility that the entire case may have been one of Norway's greatest miscarriages of justice. This is Arnfinn Nesset. And nothing about this case is simple. Arnfinn Nesset was born on October 25, 1936, in Trøndelag, a region of central Norway known for its valleys, its fjords, and its tight-knit rural communities. He trained as a nurse. He was quiet, soft-spoken, bespectacled. He did not, by any outward measure, seem dangerous. In 1977, Nesset was appointed manager of the Orkdal nursing home, a geriatric care facility in the Orkdal Valley, south of Trondheim. He was respected by colleagues. Trusted by families who placed their elderly relatives in his care. What nobody knew was that Nesset had ordered an unusual quantity of a drug called Curacet from the hospital pharmacy. Curacet, known generically as succinylmethonium chloride, is a powerful muscle relaxant used in surgical procedures to temporarily paralyze patients during intubation. In the controlled environment of an operating theater, it is a useful and necessary drug. In a nursing home, administered covertly to an elderly patient, it causes respiratory failure. The muscles that control breathing simply stop working. The patient suffocates. And crucially, Curacet becomes increasingly difficult to detect in a body as time passes. In a cremated body, it is effectively impossible to identify. Nesset knew that. During the summer and autumn of 1981, staff at the Orkdal nursing home began to notice something troubling. Patients were dying at an unusually high rate. Not in the slow, expected way of elderly people in declining health, but suddenly, unexpectedly, during the night or in the early hours of the morning. Patients who had seemed stable the day before were found dead by morning nurses arriving for their shift. It was a local journalist, not a medical professional, not a police officer, who first raised the alarm publicly. The journalist had noticed the pattern and began asking questions that the nursing home's management had not answered satisfactorily. When police began investigating, they found something that stopped them cold. A local journalist discovered large quantities of Curacet on the premises. Nesset was brought in for questioning. What happened next would define the entire case, and 30 years later, call it into question. In his first police interrogation, Nesset confessed. Not to 1 murder. Not to 5. He confessed to killing 27 patients. He described using Curacet, injecting it directly, or mixing it into food and drink. He described the deaths in detail. Then, before his trial began, he retracted everything. Every confession. Every detail. Every admission. He denied all of it and pleaded innocent on all counts. The trial of Arnfinn Nesset opened on October 18, 1982 at the Frostating Court of Appeal in Trondheim. It became one of the longest and most complex criminal proceedings in Norwegian history. Over the course of 5 months, the court heard testimony from 123 witnesses, including nursing home staff, family members of the victims, and medical personnel who had observed unusual patterns in patient deaths. The prosecution faced an enormous challenge. Most of Nesset's victims had been cremated. Standard practice for elderly nursing home patients. Without bodies, without tissue samples, without physical evidence of curicide, the prosecution had to reconstruct each murder through testimony, circumstantial evidence, and the pattern of deaths itself. Curicide becomes increasingly difficult to trace in a corpse as time passes. Consequently, the earliest murders Nesset confessed to having committed were impossible to investigate. Four psychiatrists evaluated Nesset during the proceedings. All four declared him legally sane and fit to stand trial. The defense argued that Nesset had considered himself a kind of demigod, holding the power of life and death over his patients. The judges were unmoved by this framing. On March 11, 1983, after 5 months, the jury convicted Nesset on 22 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and 5 counts of forgery and embezzlement. He had stolen approximately $1,800 from his victims' personal accounts. He was acquitted on 3 remaining murder charges. 1 week later, he received his sentence. 22 murders. 1 attempted murder. His sentence, 21 years in prison. 21 years was not a lenient sentence by Norwegian standards. It was in fact the maximum sentence allowed under Norwegian law at the time, to be followed by a further 10 years of preventive detention. But the reaction across Norway and internationally was one of disbelief. 22 confirmed murders. Possibly as many as 60, or even 138 if the full scope of suspicious deaths at every institution where Nesset had worked were included. And the maximum the Norwegian justice system could hand down was 21 years. Nesset served 12 years. He was released in 1994. He was placed under supervised release for a further 10 years. During that period, and in the decades that followed, he lived under an assumed name at an undisclosed location in Norway. The families of his victims were given no information about where he was. They could not know if he was living in their community, walking past them in a supermarket, sitting in the same church. He lived that quiet, anonymous life for 30 years. In 2025, the same year Nesset died, a Norwegian detective named Simon Cedar published a book titled The Unlikely Serial Killer, Arnfinn Nesset and His 31 Confessions. The book raised something that Norwegian true crime circles had quietly debated for years, but that had never been examined so publicly or so rigorously. Was Arnfinn Nesset actually guilty? Cedar suspects the case could represent Norway's most significant wrongful conviction in history. The argument rests on several pillars. Nesset's confessions, the foundation of the entire case, were retracted before trial. The confessions had been obtained through lengthy police interrogations at a time when Norwegian interrogation practices were not subject to the same scrutiny they would face today. Most of the physical evidence was gone. The bodies had been cremated. The curicide stockpile at the nursing home was suspicious, but Nesset was a manager, and managers order medication. The pattern of deaths was alarming. But elderly patients in nursing homes do die. Establishing that a specific death was murder rather than natural causes, without a body, without toxicology, without forensic evidence, is extraordinarily difficult. Nesset withdrew all of his admissions right before the trial commenced. While Nesset lacked the strength to pursue having the case reopened, supporters had emerged to assist him. He died on December 2, 2025, in a nursing home. Before any formal review of his case could be completed. Whether he was Norway's most prolific serial killer, or the victim of a justice system under enormous public pressure to find someone responsible for dozens of unexplained deaths, may never be definitively answered. Arnfinn Nesset died at 89 years old. In a nursing home. In the same type of institution where 22 people, at minimum, are believed to have died at his hands. If he was guilty, he spent his final decades living freely under a new name, surrounded by people who had no idea who he was or what he had done. His victims' families had no closure, no answers, and no way of knowing where the man who killed their loved ones was living. If he was innocent. He spent the final 40 years of his life as Norway's most notorious convicted killer, his name synonymous with betrayal and murder, unable to clear it before he died. Either way, the 22 elderly men and women who died at Orkdal nursing home between 1977 and 1980 deserved better than a justice system that cremated the evidence and spent 5 months arguing about what couldn't be proven. Subscribe if this case stayed with you. And leave a comment. Do you think Arnfinn Nesset was guilty? Or does the wrongful conviction argument change how you see this case? I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.